Hello, I'm Denshi, and this is Init systems in Linux, SystemD, OpenRC, and Runit, a proper comparison. This video is made because I haven't seen anybody really sit down and compare these three Init systems properly with performance comparisons and boot up time comparisons and all that kind of stuff. And let me just say the conclusion to this video is probably what you're expecting. But anyway, what the heck am I even talking about? What is an init system? It sounds like British slang. Now, an init system is essentially the third stage in booting up your operating system, a Unix operating system, so like Linux. Your computer boots up and it starts the BIOS, then the bootloader, so grub or SystemD boot, and then the init systems. And this starts daemons, so services. The init system will continue running until you shut your PC down, and SystemD, OpenRC, and Runit are the most popular Linux init systems currently out there. SystemD. It's the most popular init system. It's used in Ubuntu, Debian, Arch. It's what most distributions ship by default. I don't really know why it got so common, but it's a very common one. It's found in most distributions. If you're running a distribution right now, you're probably using SystemD. It's quite large and monolithic, and we'll come back to that later. It has many features and many functionalities for being just one program. It has all these features. It even has an optional bootloader, but this isn't following the Unix philosophy. So it's controversial for breaking Unix philosophy, and the creator spoke out against a bunch of Unix stuff. The Unix philosophy states that you should have a bunch of small programs that do some specific things very well and have them work together instead of having big programs that do one big thing. And that's where SystemD quote unquote fails, or that's why people criticize it. It's because it doesn't have that Unix fragmentation that you would find in other init systems. So speaking of other init systems, Runit. It's designed to be small, simple, and modular. It's got a simple 3-stage init process, and it's using Artix, the Runit version, and Void Linux. So if you're running Artix with Runit or Void Linux, you're using Runit as your init system. Then we have OpenRC. Once again, it's very modular. It was written in C and POSIX compliant shell, which means it can run on things like FreeBSD. I think that also applies to Runit. And it's used in Gen 2 and Artix OpenRC. So if you're running Gen 2, or if you're on Artix and using OpenRC, you're using OpenRC. So anyway, let's compare. I have 3 virtual machines, one with Artix running OpenRC, one with Artix running Runit, and one with Arch running SystemD. So here are the boot up times. And oh boy, they are very similar. It has a big outlier of 13.47 seconds, 13 seconds and 47 milliseconds, but it's not exactly enough to justify the other 18-second boot up time. OpenRC has generally consistent results, and SystemD has generally higher results than everybody else, more consistent but higher. And you'll notice that while SystemD has the longer boot up times, these are all within margin of error, so 16, 16, 17. Like, they're basically all the same in terms of boot up times. So that's boot up times cleared out of the way. They all basically boot up the same speed. Like, there's not that big a difference. It's at most going to be 4 seconds faster, which isn't a huge difference. Anyway, but my performance. RAM usage and CPU usage will be examined, and 2 tests will be used on these virtual machines. Idle desktop, so just running the desktop, and internet video playback in Chromium. So I tested out sitting there on the KDE desktop with just nothing going on and running HTOP to check the system performance in all 3 virtual machines. And I opened up Chromium and played a video to see. And here's a funny thing. OpenRC at idle was using 405, megabytes of memory, a pretty good amount. All these 3 were configured the same. It's using basically no processor. But for internet video on Chromium, it just didn't work. It did not want to install Chromium. It installed Chromium, wouldn't run. That's an Artix issue. I basically couldn't find any way to run Chromium. It's not really OpenRC's fault. But as you'll see, the results are very similar with Runit at 402 megabytes and basically the same CPU usage. And with the internet video, now being tested, 935 megabytes of memory. It's, about expected. So you'll see over here, it's 402 megabytes on idle, and this one's 405. So it's not this huge, big groundbreaking difference in performance. Then in SystemD, it's 417 megabytes on average on idle, which is slightly higher, but not enough to really break that margin of error. And on internet video, it actually performs slightly better than Runit, which was able to do 935 megabytes, while SystemD does 916. So yeah, there's very little difference both in boot times and in performance. So if you're considering any of these for a difference in boot time or a difference in performance, don't, because Runit, SystemD, all this stuff generally performs the same as long as as you have relatively modern hardware. So what are the actual differences? So OpenRC and Runit obey the Unix philosophies. They're less monolithic than SystemD. SystemD is just one big thing, while these things can be separated. They're more versatile and portable. SystemD is more common, so you'll find more daemons and documentation for SystemD. If you're like running a third-party proprietary program, let's say a VPN or something that uses a daemon, it most likely will only work on SystemD. That's the only real advantage to SystemD is, oh my god, I can run more daemons and there's more documentation. And the only advantages to OpenRC and Runit is that it follows the Unix philosophy. Problems with my testing. This testing isn't perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I tested in virtual machines. These don't perfectly emulate real hardware. Since I'm running the exact same virtual machine with 3 different operating systems with the same, I double checked to make sure it's the same settings for all 3 virtual machines. It should generally show differences properly, but I didn't test this on real hardware. I didn't get a real computer out and install 3 different distributions with 3 different Init systems and tested it all out. I didn't do that, which probably would have given me more accurate results. I could also test on older hardware because maybe I have a relatively modern computer, got an 8th gen Intel processor, got a new NVIDIA card, got a relatively modern motherboard, you know, an SSD, all that kind of stuff. Maybe on older hardware, there would genuinely be a difference. And I didn't test parameters like battery life or other things which could affect your usage of computers. Before I end this video, would you enjoy watching a video on Wayland versus Xorg or Init systems on older hardware? Because I do have some old laptops, might be able to boot them up with different Init systems and compare, and more. Well, if you want any of these things, then feel free to subscribe to this channel because, you know, if you subscribe, you'll be notified every time I do something. And, you know, that's gonna be useful if you want to watch a video on Wayland versus Xorg or Init systems on older hardware, that kind of stuff. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. It took me a while to make because of all the testing and stuff. And, well, goodbye.